In the 1950s, former President Dwight Eisenhower mandated the phrase, "In God we trust," to all U.S. paper and coin currency. Americans believe in many things, but if there is one thing they truly believe in, that is in the dollar. But they are not the only ones in the world that do that. In a global economy that is under a threat from war, recession, and an energy crisis, the US dollar has emerged as one of the few attractive assets in a way.
People might be wondering, well, a strong dollar, isn't that great for America? Well, it could have a negative impact on large American corporates that have exposure around the world. And when you take a look at the Bank of America Fund Manager Survey, right, the long US dollar remains the most crowded trade. That explains the massive rip higher that we've seen in the strength of the dollar index hitting the highest it's been since the early 2000s. And that is having a lot of ripple effects around the world as well, right?
International investors are flocking to the US dollar like lost travelers, dividing into a desert of mist of falling stock markets, bonds, and cryptocurrencies. However, the strength of the US dollar in comparison to other currencies is having a significant impact on individuals, businesses, and government. Hi everyone, and I want to welcome you to My Thoughts with Derek Kirk. In this video, we'll be talking about the US currency, its quick history, its influences on the global economy, and where is it heading? Learn more about the world with me by clicking that subscribe button. Stay tuned, and let's get right to it. You may be stuffing $100 bills under your mattress in preparation for a rainy day, but don't worry. You're not alone, as foreign governments are stockpiling those dollars too. U.S. Treasury bonds and T-bills, both value in dollars, are purchased by governments in large quantities. However, governments do not reserve actual dollars in central banks. A good indication that the U.S. dollar is still regarded as the mightiest currency worldwide is when even an economic powerhouse like China keeps $1 trillion in reserve. Let's do a little currency history in a way here. Prior to two wars, the British pound served as the reserve currency. A complex network of imperial supply chain and the power of the World Navy helped protect the British pound. As a result, the pound became a popular international currency. If you did business using the British pound, it was almost certain that your transaction would safely reach their foreign destination. Everything changed during World War I and World War II. Using a U-boat strategy in the way, the Germans successfully sank a huge number of British ships. The British Empire had to borrow a lot of money to win the wars, so they had to sell their rights as a reserve currency to the Americas in exchange for supplies and eventually an alliance. During the post-World War II, the dollar maintained its dominance. According to the Boston College political science and international studies professor Jonathan Kushner, the rise of the dollar order was based on 4 pillars: the strength of the American economy, Americans' leadership's position in international affairs, and the general trust in the American model of finance, as well as the wealth of the American financial institution. Those 4 things were highly important to keeping the strength of the dollar. According to Kushner, co-editor of The Future of the Dollar, most of the world's monetary relations were orchestrated between the US and its political allies and military dependents, and thus it made sense to conduct it in dollars. The Bretton Woods fixed exchange rate scheme fell apart in the 1970s when Richard Nixon pulled the dollar off the gold standard in the middle of a domestic inflation. The decision to float their currencies on the open market was the best choice for many industrialized economies. Some economists began to predict the dollar decline at that time, but boy, were they wrong. It wouldn't lose value, but it would lose control over the world as a de facto currency. Why is the US dollar the world's dominant reserve currency, you may want to ask? Let's talk about it. The US economy is the #1 reason why the dollar is so strong. Given this robust economy, people want to hold more and more dollars because they know they are safe. It's kind of simple in a way. Investors seek out investments knowing it's a safe haven, which are expected to maintain their value during market turmoils, recession, and even during a war.
Here at Capital.com, we've examined data from the past 7 recessions, discovered the investments that did a little better than others, and found the stocks that really got moving.
Even when times are tough, there are always stocks that will do well. I would just say that they're going to be harder to find.
As many of us know, many Americans may disagree. The United States has the largest economy in the world. It is generally stable, both politically and economically. Yes, the value of the US dollar will probably fluctuate, but it probably won't fall as much as the Turkish lira or the Argentina peso. The United States already has $2 trillion in circulation at the end of 2020, and it's estimated that half of that amount is circulating overseas, Latin America, and some other countries of the former Soviet Union, certain significant numbers of these bills. So the United States dollar is mostly outside of the United States. In many countries, the US dollar is used in everyday transaction as hard currency. The dollar rule in foreign exchange market, the US dollar is used in roughly 90% of forex trading. The International Standards Organization lists 185 currency worldwide, including the dollar.
See, looking for signs whether or not the economy is tilting into a recession. What we're seeing so far, though, is that consumer spending is held in really strongly. You're hearing from banks, especially at the beginning of the earnings season, that consumers are still spending, that consumer spending is up double digits still year over year. And so there's strength in the economy at the most fundamental level, which is the consumer. And yet you have deteriorating company confidence, I think, among the CEOs, thinking that they need to be preparing for a recession. So at a high level, that's what we're really seeing right now.
However, the majority of these currencies are only used within their respective nations. In addition to the euro, yen, the pound, the renminbi, the Canadian dollar, the Swiss franc, the Australian dollar, the US dollar is still the world's most widely used reserve currency. A large quantity of currency held by central banks is known as a reserve currency. A reserve currency eliminates the cost of settling transactions involving multiple currencies and is widely used in international trade and financial transactions. Dollars are used to issue nearly 40% of the world's debt. Subsequently, foreign banks will require a great deal of dollar to do business. This became clear during the financial crisis of 2008. Non-American banks had over 27 trillion international liabilities, insane, of foreign currency. 18 trillion of that was spent in US dollars.
The US dollar was unaffected by the turmoil. At one point, it soared 4% against a basket of major currencies, namely the euro, pound, yen, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, and Swedish krona. So why did we see this spike in the value of the US dollar?
The dollar is strong because the U.S. economy and because people want to hold dollars and the safety of the U.S. dollar.
The U.S. Federal Reserve was forced to raise its dollar swap line as a result. Only by doing that could the world's banks avoid running out of US dollars. That is saying that America had to change their standards just so the rest of the world can continue to use the US dollar. As mentioned earlier, the US currency is seen as a safe haven currency during major economic crisis, making it the choice of the currency for many investors worldwide. Investors resort to US dollars in anticipation of the dollar's continued value during the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, and the economic turmoil linked to the coronavirus disease in 2019 pandemic and in 2020.
Primarily, the move came as a result of optimism amongst investors over the global recovery from COVID-19, and consequently a greater willingness to take on risk. The provision of extraordinary stimulus by the US FOMC and other central banks across the globe was pivotal. So too a steady stream of market whispers around progress towards a vaccine. That this level has since held despite escalating risks across the globe emphasises a strong desire amongst market participants for a robust recovery.
The US Federal Reserve used extraordinary monetary authority as well as currency swap lines with other central banks to deliver liquidity in dollars. But hear this, Economic risk arises from widespread use of the dollar. As a result of low borrowing costs, debt can be built up and funds can be borrowed may not be put towards profitable investments. Additionally, the increasing demand for the dollar as a reserve currency may lead to a stronger US dollar. Although US customers may benefit from cheaper imports, a stronger US dollar may make it challenging for US producers to compete in a global market, resulting in a persistent trade deficit in a way. The Federal Reserve tightened monetary policies to combat the rising inflations in a way. This results in a strengthening dollar since the mid-2000s. In addition to having an effect on the US export, a rising dollar will make it harder for many other nations to pay their debts off in the face of rising interest rates and the declining in global growth in a way. So it's kind of making other countries who owe us money to pay us when our value keeps increasing on our dollar. It would suck if you're an African nation or a Southeast Asian nation that owes us money and you have to earn American dollars to pay us debts, which means you have to continue doing business with us that you may not can afford to pay our debts, which cripples your own economy and growth in a way, which is a selfish thing for America in a way, but that's just the way the world works. What are the challenges to the US dollar growth position? Let's talk about it. The global economy has undergone changes in regard to dominance in currency. For instance, the United States eventually overtook the United Kingdom as the largest economy and exporter in the world. Through a number of significant shifts, the United States dollar has remained the world's dominant reserve currency for several decades now. This includes the end of a fixed exchange rate, globalization of trade and financial technological advances, and shifts in geopolitics. Some observers have wondered if shifts in the global economy and global political situations might lead to the dollar being replaced by other currencies. Many economists believe that the rise of China's economy, US sanctions, and digital currencies may have something to do with the possible shifts. How the US dollar affect the world's economy today and maybe in the future. The COVID-19 pandemic obviously ransacked the global economy and has shown the flaws of the US dominant currency.
On Saturday, some of these small businesses really did get a much needed boost, Diane. And if you look at analytics from Adobe Analytics, they print out all these kinds of reports, even online. For smaller businesses, they netted $4.7 billion. So that's about a 30% increase from last year. But to the point of the guests that you featured earlier, the disadvantage for a lot of these local stores is that they really benefit so much from foot traffic and from browsing.
Prior to the pandemic, it was very convenient for large parts of the world to conduct business in dollar because we knew that the United States dollar was the currency that was traded mostly globally. But when there aren't enough dollars to go around during a pandemic, this overdependence can be a problem. Despite the fact that the central banks can assist with liquidity in their respective local currencies, it still can be difficult to aid business with dollars in a few jurisdictions. Liquidity is the first issue, and the significant foreign exchange risk is the second. Regardless of the country's struggle economy, investors still want to keep their money in safe havens like the US Treasuries, and this is due to the United States stability. Throughout the pandemic, the value of the US dollar has increased and increasing by 5.3%, but that's against the euro at 7.7%, and that is against the Japanese yen at 5.9%, which matches the Swiss franc, and at 13.9% is against the British pound. We can therefore imagine the consequences that businesses and non-US companies had to go through, these businesses aren't compelled to convert their declining local currencies into US dollars. Another consideration is the absence of consistent revenue from governments locked down during the 2020 pandemic. During a crisis like this, a strengthening dollar will hurt economies' activities in emerging markets and international trade, which are already currently struggling. The ultimate question is, what will the future of the US dollar look like? There are rumors that eventually the Chinese yen will replace the US dollar. However, there is an ongoing general agreement that the US dollar will continue to be the world's currency. We'll kind of see how that works out. However, despite these efforts, it may be premature to declare that the US dollar reign is kind of over. Even during the times of crisis, such as COVID-19 pandemic, investors have rushed to put their money in US dollars because they're still considering it to be a safe haven and a safe bet for a capital flow. The United States of America continues to be the nation with the deepest capital markets in the world. What we will see is possibly something that has never happened in history. Once the United States gets knocked off of its pedestal in a way as the dominant currency, we will see maybe China, if not China, other currencies are started to use instead of the United States dollar. While China continues to be the world's largest exporter and is close to challenging the US in terms of economic size, it only contributes to stable portions of the global currency reserve. Perhaps the country's capital control is largely to blame for such matters. The US economy fundamental strength is its ability to foster trust in a way. That's what makes the US dollar so powerful. People just believe in it and trust it around the world. That's the only thing that's backing the US currency. Among traders and investors, through its monetary policy, stability and transparency in the financial markets, with data-driven decision-making, investors and traders are likely to invest in the US dollar continues to be the world's most widely used currency for these reasons. The United States of America is still globally trusted and confidence in its capability to fulfill its obligations despite its ongoing large deficit spending and $1 trillion foreign debt. As a result, the US dollar continues to be the most powerful currency in the world. Who knows? The US dollar may still remain to be the top global currency for many years to come. How long do you think the US dollar will be as the global world reserve currency? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and learn more about the world with me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.